A little while back, during my Terror Knight Denim build video, I promised a general overview of the classes in Tactics Ogre Reborn. But there's a lot of classes in Tactics Ogre Reborn, so today we're going to talk about the basic humanoid classes, we'll talk about the more advanced, rare, and non-humanoid classes in a later video. Hello everyone, my name is Tom, otherwise known as Titanium Legman. I hope those of you who celebrate Thanksgiving had a good one. I sure did. And I hope everyone else has had a good time during our little break. I'm thankful for all the support the channel has gotten. It's certainly something I talked about with my family. And it does look like we're likely going to hit that 5K mark by the end of the year. If you want to make sure we do, please subscribe. And thank you. Today, we're doing a basic overview of the classes you'll most commonly see on either side of the battlefield. I'll cover unique, rare, or race-specific classes in a later video. This one is chunky enough as it is, so let's get started. One disclaimer before we do, though. Keep in mind that some classes have two names, one for the male version of the class and one for the female. This is due to the original classes in the Super Nintendo version of Tactics Ogre, where there weren't always versions of a class for both genders, so many classes were removed, changed, or rolled together to balance things. This led to some names being changed, added, or removed as well to fit in the new system. So, if a class has two names, there were probably major changes made to it in the game's past. Just wanted to explain that for clarity. Starting off, we have Warrior. Warriors are, funny enough, the starting class for any unit who aspires to a life of melee expertise. They can use most weapon types in the game and are quite proficient with all of them. Those weapons are fists, knives, swords, two-handed swords, axes, hammers, cudgels, whips, bows, and crossbows. Because of this, Warrior is a good starter choice to get weapon levels for your preferred class down the road. As you might expect, Warriors also have very solid offensive capabilities and will be some of your highest damage dealers in the early game thanks to the guaranteed critical hits provided by their vigorous attack skill. While they will fall off some once you get classes like Berserkers or Ninjas for damage dealing, Warriors will still be useful thanks to some support abilities for melee attackers, as well as still dealing acceptable damage themselves. Unlike in Let Us Cling Together, where Warriors were quickly replaced, there may be some merit to bringing one to the endgame. Moving on to Archers. Archers were previously one of the best classes, if not the best class, in Tactics Ogre. As your primary ranged physical attacker, it's easy to see why, thanks to their attacks not requiring MP, increasing range with extra height, and having powerful finishing moves and abilities. Now, those are all still true. However, the massive damage that Archers used to have has been scaled back significantly. In Reborn, Archers take a little bit more of a support role. They are still adept at picking off soft targets like cloth wearers from extreme range, and have automatic critical skills like Warriors. With the right buffs and debuffs on your team, this damage can extend to other armor types as well, but it does take some work. Later in the game, crafted bows come with status effects on them that Archers are able to spread around quite well as well, with their abilities that increase hit chance to 100%, giving them another niche as well. Wizards and Enchantresses are the next on the block, and they are the first spellcaster of the game, utilizing any element of magic other than light, and they have two major roles. The first is magical damage dealing, using both targeted missile spells and indirect spells that deal area of effect damage when upgraded. The second is casting status magic into debuffs using dark magic like Paralytic Wave, Sleep, and Poison Cloud. The damage these spellslingers can deal is nice, especially against tanky targets, but the true power of the Wizard and the Enchantress are those status spells. Being able to control the tempo of battle by hard limiting the capabilities of the enemy is invaluable, especially against beasts and dragons. Also, Wizards and Enchantresses are the only class capable of recruiting powerful lizard men, so it's worth having one on hand for that alone. Next we have Clerics, and Clerics are the tried and true healer class, and will be present on nearly any team. If you've played an RPG, you're familiar with the idea of a Cleric. They excel at healing HP, cleansing negative status effects, and in some cases buffing your team. Most notably, however, is their ability to exorcise the undead enemies you'll encounter throughout the game, removing them from battle and preventing them from resurrecting themselves. There's really not much else to say about clerics, honestly. They have little in the way of offense, and you even get a very capable, unique cleric in Donalto near the start of the game, so you don't really need to put too much thought into how you use this class. Next, we have Rune Fencers and Valkyries, and this is one of the first major powerhouse classes that you'll be able to get. They're with you right from the start of the game. Most often, you'll see them wielding swords and spears alongside powerful offensive magic and some support spells. And these spell swords, they really can do it all. They can wield every type of magic in the game with the exception of Dark, and they come equipped with magic support abilities such as Meditate and Concentration to ensure they always have MP and can reliably hit with their spells. They're also generally quite fast and have the ability to move through water, which is a nice bonus. Finally, they're one of the only classes that can use the Instill family of spells, granting themselves resistance to the chosen element of the spell, as well as additional damage on each attack of that element. They deal damage, they heal, they can attack from melee and from range, and they'll be with you until the end of the game. Also, some of the better unique units in the game start as Valkyries, so that's a nice little bonus. Next up we have Knights. Knights, like Clerics, are a rather simple class, as there's really just two things you want them to do. You want them to stand in the way of the enemy, and throw out the occasional heal or attack. Knights are heavily armored tanks with plenty of skills that prevent the enemy from pushing past them and reducing the damage they take from enemy attacks. They're also able to heal themselves and their allies with healing magic, although they can't use anything other than basic heal spells. Knights' damage output is also acceptable. They aren't going to be one-shotting anything, but they can certainly help the push. All told, you'll probably be using a knight or two for a good long while, so get comfortable with them. Moving on from the boring side of tanking, we get to the edgy, cool, 90s anime, great sword-wielding Terror Knights. As the second major tanking class you're likely to get, Terror Knights take a more violent approach to damage mitigation by inflicting fear on enemy units, massively reducing their attack and their defense. They also come equipped with dark magic, allowing them to inflict status effects, drain the enemy's health and mana, and grant themselves dark damage and resistance via Instill Dark. As such, Terror Knights deal far more damage on the front line than Knights, and can severely cripple the enemy push. They come equipped with heavy armor just like regular Knights, and they wield heavy two-handed weapons. It's worth noting, however, that the TK's lack of defensive options does make them far less durable until they apply fear to the enemy, and all of that heavy equipment does make them one of the slowest classes in the game. So don't think it's all roses and sunshine for these brooding warriors. They're good, but they're not game-breaking. Speaking of edge and damage, let's talk about Berserkers. Berserkers are another class that got a lot of buffs in the transition to Reborn, much like TKs and Valkyries. As you might guess, Berserkers are all about dealing big numbers, and in return they take a lot of big numbers. Their skills focus on dealing as much damage as possible to as many people as possible, oftentimes at the expense of themselves or their allies. They do have some damage mitigation, but overall, it's kill or be killed with these guys. Don't be intimidated, though, by this devil-may-care playstyle. The damage that Berserkers bring to the table is worth it. Just be ready with some healing if you decide to field one. Berserkers most often wield hammers, axes, and fist weapons. However, Berserkers aren't the only big damage dealers in the game. Next up is Swordmasters, inspired by the wandering Ronin of old. They wield two-handed katanas, and are experts at setting up one big attack that deals a ton of damage. Critical hits are the name of the game here, and when they have the right skills active, said crits will often do more damage than their finishing moves. Swordmasters also come with built-in counter, meaning they'll always strike back when struck, sometimes even before the enemy gets their hit in the first place. However, unlike Berserkers, Swordmasters also bring utility to the table with a suite of AoE buff, debuff, and healing sword dances. So even when they aren't swinging their swords, they're still helping the team. A great unit all around. Moving on to Dragoons, we have another specialist unit like Clerics. Now, this isn't to say that Dragoons are healers, it's more that they have one role they do very well, and not too much else going for them. You see, Dragoons are your anti-beast and dragon kings. They wield skills that increase the damage of everyone around them against these units, as well as activatable attacks that can near one-shot them. Dragoons don't mess around. They typically wield spears or two-handed weapons, although you can also give them a crossbow for some long-range monster hunting if you so choose. However, outside of this role, they have little to offer. Knights and Terror Knights are better frontliners in terms of heavily armored warriors, and even actual warriors can deal better damage against non-beast targets. There is a small niche in that Dragoons can wield spears and pincer attack, which can lead to some nutty outcomes, but it's not a huge mark in their favor, and it's a playstyle that requires very specific setup. In general, use them against beasts and dragons, but consider other options elsewhere. On the other side of the beasts and dragons coin, we have beast tamers. Whereas dragoons are great slayers, beast tamers work alongside these magnificent creatures, recruiting them to your cause and providing them with powerful buffs. They can wield axes and fist weapons, but are often better off with whips and blowguns to apply status effects and debuffs. This is a utility class through and through, and in most cases you only want to field them if you also have beasts or dragons for them to empower. That said though, they do bring a lot of extra power to those units, so it is worth doing if you're going to run them. However, there is also a case that can be made for beast tamers as field medics, thanks to their lobber skill, which allows them to throw healing, buff, and debuff items a fair distance across the battlefield. This will come to great use against later game bosses with their big stats and full suite of buff cards, so it's worth having one on hand, even if you don't tend to run monsters. Rounding out our melee damage dealers, we have Ninja and Kunoichi. These stealthy assassins are one of the most versatile classes in the game, wielding one-handed katana, knives, bows, and blowguns. They also wield powerful magic in the form of ninjutsu, which, unlike previous versions of the game, can actually deal a lot of damage. There is also status effect inflicting ninjutsu, because of course there is, as well as ninjutsu that activates automatically to apply status effects to your weapons. Finally, ninjas are infamous for their ability to dual wield and attack with both weapons at the same time, doubling their damage output in melee. So, what does this all mean? Well, it means that ninjas are one of the classes that you really, honest to God, can run multiple of and have no single one of them function the same way. You can build them as a melee range killer, or a ranged magic damage dealer, or a versatile debuffer with ranged weapons. All in all, it's a stellar class, and it'll serve you well in any capacity. It's one of the classes that people love to turn Denim into to increase his damage output, and as an added bonus, they can just randomly reduce the damage they take for a turn, or choose to blow up for massive damage in an AoE around them before resurrecting themselves. They're ridiculous. Use them. They're awesome. Finally, we end our discussion of the basic classes with Warlocks and Witches. Essentially, these are souped-up wizards and enchantresses, sporting better stats and equipment as well as the ability to wield some light magic. They also gain abilities that allow them to control and debuff golems, which will see some niche uses here and there. Realistically, if you're using an offensive magic caster, switch them to a Warlock or a Witch when you can. You'll be glad that you did. Also, and this is a little bit of like a postscript addition here, Warlocks and Witches also have the ability to wield Draconic magic, which is a rare, late-game, very powerful field of magic. But I'm not sure what the status of Draconic magic is in Tactics Ogre Reborn. It was a thing in Let Us Cling Together. I've not gotten far enough in the game myself, and I haven't seen people talking about it, so I don't know if you can actually get Draconic magic in this version of the game. But if you can, that's another mark in favor of the Warlock and the Witch. Throw a spellbook on them, use Engulf, and you will make a magic sniper. They'll have range of 11 plus with magic. It's disgusting. Whew. And that was a lot. Not running too long, but longer than I would have liked. So we're going to keep the outro short this time, guys. Thanks for all the support. Lots more videos coming down the pipe. And now that we're done with Thanksgiving, I should be back to a normal pace of 2 or 3 a week. My name is Tom, otherwise known as Titanium Legman. Keep the suggestions coming. Have a good night. Stay safe and healthy out there. And remember, be good to each other. Bye now.